This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium-bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets, episode 147, live from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Make sure you're following Subway to Shea on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Subway to Shea. You can follow me at Ant Rivera 86. I'll put that up for you right there. And subscribe, listen, watch the Subway to Shea podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you check out tonight, Mets Evening Brew on the Morning Brew Sports Network. Usually we're on Thursdays, but this week we are on Monday night, tonight, 9 o'clock. Eddie Presti, Al Cintrone of WFAN, and myself, talking about the Mets, and we'll probably be going through most of the games since it's going to start at 9 o'clock. Game starts at 8, so make sure you are locked in for that. Huge thank you to last episode's guest, Tom Pringle, co-host of Bat Flips and Nerds. You can follow him on X at Pedroia's Face and the podcast Bat Flips and Nerds at batflips_nerds. Shout out to everyone in the chat. 22 people here to start. I saw Lane Kerner in here. Duran Rivera, Carlos Ortiz is in the house. Maureen is in the house as well, and she is going to a couple of the games in Texas. So I hope you enjoy those. I said tomorrow and Wednesday's game. Make sure you enjoy those games. And I also got Ibby in here from Till Mets Do Us Part. Brad in the house. Armand checking everyone out here. Shea Parking Lot, my guy. Great to have you on here as well. We got a lot to talk about, and we're going to have a guest shortly. Pat Ragazzo is going to join us. He's the Mets and Yankees reporter, insider for Sports Illustrated, and you can follow him on X at Ragazzo Report. He'll be joining us in just a few moments, but I want to start off recapping what happened this weekend, and what a weekend it was for the New York Mets, as the sweep dreams, as I like to say on Twitter, as they swept the San Diego Padres. That's the wild card 2 or 3 leading San Diego Padres, and the Mets have put themselves in good position. We start off with game 1. The Mets and Edwin Diaz held off the Padres for a 2-1 win. Sean Manaea with the win, 5 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, and 7 strikeouts. You got JD Martinez hitting a 2-run double, and that was all they needed. Edwin Diaz got his first save in 39 days. How apropos, since he's number 39, but it's great to see Edwin Diaz get back into form. We're going to see if he can be that consistently as the season moves forward, because we're going to need him if the Mets have any chance at making the playoffs. In game 2, JD Martinez powered the Mets to a 5-1 victory. I was there in the house. Jose Quintana, his best start in I want to say a month or two. He got the win, 6 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 run. One of them earned 2 walks and 6 strikeouts. JD Martinez, he's going to be the story of this whole weekend, and probably the story of this episode outside of Grimace. 3 for 3, 2 home runs, 3 RBIs, 2 runs, and 2 walks. Game 3, the Mets offense powered the Mets to an 11-6 win. Tyler McGill, 5 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 5 strikeouts. You got home runs from Lindor. Pete Alonso got a big home run that was much needed, and Luis Torrens also hitting well. He got a home run himself, and you got 3 hits from Nimmo, 5 RBIs for Alonso, and I think JD Martinez got on base, I think it was 10 times in a row over this past week, so nice to see him get into the business and get started here for what was a nice sweep of the San Diego Padres. And joining me now, my guy, my man, Pat Ragazzo from Sports Illustrated. So great to have him on the show. Pat, you saw some of the recap of this weekend series. What are your takeaways from what you saw from the Mets this weekend?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you again. Love the stuff you do. and put out there as always. And right now, I mean, June swoon might have came in a month early this year for the Mets. May was a disaster, to be completely candid about it. And now things seem to be clicking on all cylinders, whether it's the red hot JD Martinez. Brendan Nimmo had a good weekend. He's been in a slump since late May. Francisco Lindor, his bat has been coming around for about a month now. Pete Alonso seems like he's starting to get things going a little bit. Solly Marte has been on fire. And then the new guys, Luis Torrens has made an impact as a backup catcher. Now, Francisco Alvarez came back last Tuesday, and his bat is yet to really get going yet. He did have an RBI hit the other night, earlier last week, or towards the end of last week, I should say. But he's made a major impact with the pitching staff, which they was sorely missed. Francisco Alvarez's presence behind the plate, and it showed in the ERA numbers ever since he got hurt in late April. So now he's back. Edwin Diaz is back, of course, but focusing more on the lineup, I mean, everyone just kind of getting hot at the right time. And I know Mark Vientos really has been cold the last couple of games, but over the course of the last 2 weeks, he's hitting around 270. He's had a lot of pop since the Mets brought him back up from the minors, replaced him with Beatty, of course, at third base. And yeah, things are just going well for the Mets right now offensively, and they've been waiting for several months for this to occur. And now as the weather's heated up, the Mets lineup is heated up, and they're starting to win some games here.
We always talk about if the Mets win, 2-3 games in a row, like, is this run for real, right? And then they would go on and lose 3 in a row. And then now after that May Day, if you want to call it, that struggles during May, that they only won 9 games for the month. Is this run, you think, for real? Look, they went 11-4 since the meeting, 9-2 since the bus picture that everyone's talking about, 5-0 since Grimace threw out the first pitch. Have we entered that Grimace era? I think he's like become the unofficial mascot outside of Mr. Met. What has this run showed you so far?
Well, it shows the potential of this club. David Stearns and Steve Cohen spoke during spring training on numerous occasions, saying they believe that they built a team that could make a playoff spot this year or push for one. And the Mets still have a little bit of a ways to go. They're 4 games under 500. They were so far down deep in the depth sub 500 not too long ago that they had some major climbing to do. And now they're almost there. The job's not finished, but they have won 5 in a row since Grimace throughout the first pitch, of course, and they've won 11 of their last 15 games. So they've been on a tear the last 2 weeks or so. And yeah, I mean, I think that the Mets, they are showing that potential now without their ace, Kodai Senga, who has yet to throw a pitch this season. And we probably won't see him back until after the All-Star break, which is still a month away. So Edwin Diaz is back, like we said. He looks like vintage Diaz so far, throwing with his lower body again, which multiple scouts were saying that he looked like he was throwing all arm, potentially to protect the knee. Diaz told the great Andy Martino that he felt maybe he ramped things up too quickly in spring training after missing an entire year, that his shoulder maybe just was tired. But he clearly went down to the minors on that rehab assignment and during his time off on the IL and figured some things out mechanically. And he's locating his fastball. The velocity is back. He hit 100 miles per hour for the first time all season last week. His slider has bite down in the zone. He's commanding it 91 miles per hour. It looks like the Edwin Diaz of old, and that's what the Mets need if they're going to seriously push to make a wild card spot this year. And they are right there as a game and a half back, and the NL is very weak once you get past the Phillies, of course, and the Dodgers, who are now banged up. And the Braves are banged up as well, and they've been slumping, but they still have their position as the top team, wild card team in the NL. So Steve Cohen also said that in spring training as well, that there was a major drop-off after the top few teams in the National League, and that has proved to be true so far. And the Padres are in a wild card spot, but the Mets just swept them over the weekend. And the Padres were coming in on a 3-game winning streak. They're super talented, whether it's Luis Arias, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Fernando Tatis Jr., Dylan Cease. Like, the Padres have a lot of talent, but they just haven't really – they've been – rather mediocre this year. And I think the Mets now are playing up to some of these weaker teams in the NL. So yeah, I mean, anything can happen. We still have about a month and maybe 5 weeks roughly until the trade deadline in late July. And The Mets need to continue to turn things up here, and they can't hit another lull. Otherwise, they're going to be destined to be sellers at the trade deadline, which was already the expectation prior to the last 15 days.
I tend not to look at the standings until we get closer to the trade deadline, seeing, like you said, whether the Mets are going to buy or sell. But there's just so many teams, especially at the start of June. I think there were only 4 teams at the time at the start of June that in the National League that were over 500. I think about like 4 or 5. And, the Mets are still in the thick of things. You could talk about the meeting, you could talk about Grimace and all that stuff. But over this past week, this homestand, you could go a little further. The person that's really been carrying this team is the guy they got in free agency about a week before the season started, and that's JD Martinez. I mean, you look at the last 15 days, batting .333, 5 home runs, 16 RBI. He's got 10 walks in that span. For the season, he's .293, got 8 homers, 27 RBIs, and an .881 OPS. It took a while for him to take off, and obviously he needed that extended spring training. But JD Martinez has pretty much been as advertised for the Mets. It took him a while to come up with some big hits, but he had that big game winner on Thursday against the Miami Marlins. What do you think of what we've seen so far from JD Martinez?
Well, JD Martinez has said it multiple times. There's no pressure now. Whatever they do, they're just going out there and having fun. And he's been red hot. He's hitting home runs in bunches. He's going the other way. He looks locked in. He looks like the hitter he was throughout his career, making a name for himself as a designated hitter for the Red Sox. And then he had a huge year for the Dodgers last year in an elite lineup. So he's hitting extremely well as of late, and it's kind of infectious in the Mets lineup. So if JD Martinez and the Mets don't solidify themselves as legit playoff contenders, I mean, he's going to be traded out as a rental in a month, and his value should be a little higher, even though he's a rental bat and he's aging and he doesn't play a defensive position. But his value probably will be higher if he continues to swing as hot of a bat as he has, because he can make an impact on any contender's lineup right now.
Yeah, you got to just think of this as an extreme positive for the Mets in so many ways. Either they keep him for a playoff run, or at the deadline, they can, trade him and probably get a prospect out of it, because I'm sure some playoff team is going to want a JD Martinez type bat in their lineup at DH to, boost them, into a different level and get them over the hump.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets were talking about acquiring him 2 years ago, as I've reported a couple times in the past year or so. They were talking to the Red Sox around the trade deadline in 22, and the Red Sox wanted a little too much for a rental bat who was dealing with back spasms and hit a slump. He was an all-star in the first half, had a great first half for the Sox that year, and then he really fell off due to some back issues. So yeah, I mean, now he looks healthy and he's performing extremely well. So he could help a number of teams.
Yeah, I look at this run that JD Martinez is, and I'm trying to think of, because we're starting to see the All-Star ballot start to come out. Is he one of those guys that could be an All-Star? And right now I have him, and I have Luis Severino, who's 4-2 with a 3.12 ERA. Do you think that the Mets will be able to send these two to the All-Star break? Like, would you vote for both of them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance. And the Mets right now, the voting came out today. Pete Alonso is really the only one who has a shot, and he hasn't even been the normal Pete Alonso we're accustomed to seeing each year. And it seems to be coming around a little bit recently, and hit his 15th home run. He's still on pace to go over 30 this year. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible, but they just got to keep up this offensive production as a whole.
I saw, Pete on Saturday towards his last at bat, got a nice double, turned that into a home run on Sunday. They really need him to break out here because he's one of those key cogs in this lineup that really hasn't been able to get going. Lindor has finally figured it out. We had Brandon Nimmo, had the first month and a half he was playing well, and now he's had multiple hit games to get himself back on track. But Pete seems all out of sorts, especially in big spots. Not only is he missing pitches like he always does down and away, but there are some meatballs right down the plate that he has just not been able to hit. What do you think he's got to do to just, get himself back on track? I look at him too, and his body language. He's not the same LFGM, fun-loving, fun-having Pete Alonso. Now, I know he's struggling, but even during his struggles over the last couple of years, he seemed to have had that personality that just seems to be missing this season. I don't know if it's a Scott Boras be professional type thing for your contract. I just don't know. But Pete just seems out of sorts. I don't know if you get that since, you get to go into the locker room too and interview these guys. Do you get that sense of feeling from him?
I mean, I don't. I think Pete Alonso is in a tough place. He has a lot weighing on him with the contract and the free agency decision coming up in the offseason. I mean, the Mets are not going to extend him from now until the end of the regular season. So he knows he's hitting the open market, and there's a chance that he might be leaving the team that he's only known his whole professional career. So I think Pete Alonso looks better as of late. He just needs to swing at good pitches and do damage on those pitches. And he's been able to do so. At least we saw in this series and yesterday when he homered with authority. And when guys like JD Martinez, Francisco Lindor, Francisco Alvarez, once his back gets going, Starling Marte keeps it up, Brandon Nimmo gets back on track, like that's protection in the lineup. And that's something Pete didn't have last year. And that's why he batted a career low 217. So I just think that it's all about, protection, and they're going to have to pitch to Pete. They're going to have to pitch. They're not going to want to pitch to JD Martinez right now, but they're going to have to pitch to somebody. So I think that Pete Alonso he'll be fine. I'm not too worried about him.
Once again, I'm here with Pat Ragazzo, Mets and Yankees reporter and insider for Sports Illustrated. This week, we got to see the returns of Edwin Diaz and Francisco Alvarez. Like I mentioned, Edwin Diaz got the save on Friday with 2 strikeouts, a big strikeout to end the game. And like you mentioned, pitchers seem to be happy that, Francisco Alvarez has returned. We got to hear from Jose Quintana on Saturday, talk about his impact and his effect. Jolly Olive from John Boy posted that Alvarez with the Mets 15-6, without Alvarez 17-31. So his bat has not picked up yet, but just him behind the plate has been dearly missed this season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, the Mets now are at full strength again. They are for the most part. I mean, without Senga, of course, but they're at mostly full strength. And I think Mark Vientos and the impact he's been able to make, I know they weren't really projecting him as a third baseman, but he's done a solid enough job. I mean, he still makes some boots in the infield, but he's a very strong arm, pretty accurate arm, and he has made some really strong plays as well there. They're still waiting on Brett Beatty to get it together. I mean, he's hitting well in AAA, which is the norm for him, even when he's been sent down previously in his career. But Mark Vientos right now, beyond a recent, mini slump, whatever you want to call it, he's done a really good job. And I think that the Mets have a chance to make a little run here if they can keep up this play.
How much leeway do you think Mark Vientos has? I know he's just struggling over the last couple of games, but, he really made an impact when he was given that third base role and Beatty got sent down. How much leeway do you think they're giving him as opposed to what they gave Brett Beatty?
I think that just the leeway that here is you perform, and if you're not performing, then they're going to have to go with another option. I mean, you look at Jeff McNeil, who has really had a rough season coming off another tough campaign last year. He won the batting title in 2022, but 2021 was the worst statistical year of his career. And Jose Iglesias came up from AAA a little too late, in my opinion, and he's made a major impact. And McNeil's been getting some more playing time recently and making some nice plays, some game-saving plays potentially in the field. But at the same time, Iglesias has been known for being a whiz for his glove. He strengthens their defense up the middle more so than McNeil does consistently. And he's hit a good bit since they brought him up. So, it's perform or they'll take you out unless your name's Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, JD Martinez, Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Alvarez too as well, even though Luis Torrens has really torn the cover off the ball and played strong defense as well. the other guys kind of just, it's got to prove yourself right now because they are fighting for their lives with not too much time left to show that they're not going to be sellers, but potentially small buyers at the trade deadline to at least stamp their ticket to the postseason in October as a wild card team.
It's odd to have concern right now for Starling Marte, considering that his bat has been very well this season, but his defense just has not been, up to par. We saw that game 1 in London for the Philly. Then we saw a play on Sunday as well that he could just not get to. Then he makes an amazing catch sliding. Is it Starling Marte's defense diminished? Is it what he said last week that he's not been positioned correctly? What is the deal with the defense going on right now?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think the double groin surgery was a lot on him and on his body. Of course, that's a major procedure to undergo. He's 35 years old. I feel that he hasn't been positioned great. His athleticism is still very, very impressive, but it's not what it used to be, of course, especially coming off a major surgery and at his age. So I'm not too worried about Marte's fielding as long as he continues to hit the way that he has. I think that he has earned a starting spot in the Mets lineup and being in there every day because he has been pretty productive on offense. He's not the same all-star that we saw in 2022 or previously in his career with the Pirates and the Marlins, and the Oakland A's, of course, when he got traded there, but he's still a very solid starting outfielder, and his defense hasn't been too much of a liability despite some plays he hasn't been able to get to, whether it's positioning or not.
Pat, before I let you go, I wanted to get into Kodai Senga real quick. 2 innings bullpen session for Wednesday is set. After that, he may face live hitters. I'm kind of just going into this as if, he might not return. I mean, all these updates we've been getting, it just reminds me of what we dealt with Jacob deGrom, even Max Scherzer to a certain extent. And I don't want to say I'm not buying into it, but I'm going into this thinking that there's a possibility that he just doesn't return this season. And, are the Mets prepared for something like that? I mean, obviously they got Christian Scott down in AAA, Jose Butto, but they've played most of the season without him. I just want to know what's their thought process on this whole thing?
Well, there's always a possibility that Kodai Senga will not be able to return if he suffers another setback when he starts ramping up again fully. And it's been very light in the process because he tried ramping up and then a new injury popped up in the triceps area from a shoulder strain that he had in spring training. And when Stearns spoke to us in the dugout in Port St. Lucie at Clover Park back in late February, he was confident Kodai Senga was going to make a significant amount of starts for the Mets this year. And obviously that confidence has probably gone down in his mind, and it's gone down within the organization and from the outside perspective as well because of this setback he had to his arm after dealing with a shoulder injury. And now they're playing it very, very careful, as they should be. And it's just little baby steps, slowly but surely. He's throwing bullpens and he'll have to face live hitters before he's ready to get into a rehab assignment. And then he's going to need a couple rehab assignments before he's deemed ready to get back into major league action. So that's why they're saying All-Star break, post All-Star break for Senga, because he just has missed so much time. He's dealt with multiple injuries in a short period of time that they cannot risk losing him to another injury, and especially a serious injury that could affect next season, especially in a season where they're still climbing their way back to be considered as serious postseason contenders, because they weren't as of 2 weeks ago and really as of the last couple of days. I mean, they've strung together some more wins here, a 5-game winning streak and 11 of their last 15. But before that, of course, May was so rough that it was looking like a lost year, and it was deemed a transition year coming into 2024 as well. But I think Senga, you just need to stay maybe even keel with your expectations there, Anthony, because we just don't know at this point. But he is on the road back. It's just going to take at least another month, and we'll see if anything else pops up or not. I'd say 50-50 right now. But I'm more so in the glass half full mentality with him, that things will probably work out as long as he doesn't push too hard, rush too much, because that's likely what happened when he was trying to come back from the shoulder strain, and that's how the triceps popped up. So as long as he doesn't feel anything else in the coming weeks, then I would say the probability meter of him pitching this season and pitching around the expectation of him returning after the All-Star break will come to fruition. But it's just definitely a wait and see mode with how the rest of his rehab goes.
I always try to play the cautious optimist, but
Perfect.
hopefully he does return, and I think it'd be such a huge boost not only to this rotation, but just to the morale of the team. Pat, I can't thank you enough for joining me. I know you got to go. I appreciate your time. Every time we get to talk, just a shout out for you from one of our commenters, Shea Parking Lot, saying you have interior decorating is elite, my friend.
Thank you. This is actually my parents' house. I'm still home for Father's Day weekend, the extended version. So my mom will be happy with that compliment. So thank you. But I no longer live here.
Pat, I appreciate you, man. You have a great one. We'll be in touch. All right.
Sounds good. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. All right. That was Pat Ragazzo, Mets and Yankees reporter, insider for Sports Illustrated. Always fun talking to him and having him on the show. 73 of you guys are in here right now. So do me a favor, like this video, share it as well on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever. Share it with any Met fan out there. Let them know that this is the place to be right now. And I will get to your comments. Just wanted to get Pat in here. He has a busy schedule today. So I wanted to get him in, get everything out there, and then get to the comments because I know you got a lot to say today. Make sure also you're subscribed to Subway to Shea on YouTube, as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And like it says on the bottom, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea, and me, Anthony Rivera, on X at AntRivera86. I talked about this earlier. You can catch me tonight at 9 o'clock on the Mets Evening Brew on the Morning Brew Sports Network with my guys Eddie Presti and Al Centrone of WFAN. Will probably be through halfway of the game. We're going to be taking calls, or we're going to be doing the discussion with any fan that wants to join us. So make sure you're tuned in at 9 o'clock. After this show, at 5 o'clock, is going to be the Mets Weekly Show with my guys Carson, Andrew, and Frank, and a good friend joining the show from Shea and Sons, Keith. Make sure you check them out as soon as this show is over. Let me get to your comments. Let me get to your questions and everything you guys want to talk about. Here we go. AB posted, Mets are 16-6 with Alvarez, 17-31 without. We discussed that as well earlier with Pat. So thank you for the update. I think I had him at 15-6. So maybe that was the day before. Shea Parking Lot saying thoughts and prayers to Tomas Nido. Gonna miss that guy after 12 years, I think it is. Tomas Nido was released, so he is now a free agent. We'll see what happens for him and his career. But with the addition of Luis Torrens and how Luis Torrens has been playing this season, there was no way that the Mets were going to keep Tomas Nido, and we knew what we were getting with Tomas Nido, right? I've talked about it for the last couple of weeks. We knew what we were getting in Tomas Nido, and the fact that the Mets decided to go in a different direction shows that this ownership is ready to take this team in a new direction. Even if it's just a short span of what we got from Luis Torrens, you already knew what you were getting in Tomas Nido, which is, okay hitting and okay defense. He was a good framer. He was a good pitch caller. But besides that, I mean, he was just a little bit better than Omar Narvaez, who was probably one of the worst catchers that I've ever seen from this team. We're talking about, there have been some bad catchers in Mets history. Brian Schneider comes to mind. Wilson Ramos' second year is one of the worst years. I think that was the 2020 year. Awful. And even James McCann was a pretty bad catcher. But Omar Narvaez is probably the worst investment this team ever made under Billy Epler. Even with Tomas Nido there, they still signed him to a 2-year deal. Now, originally I was for the deal, just going back and thinking what he did for this team what he did for Milwaukee, almost being an all-star. He just could not get himself going, and he was not good with the pitchers. I'm so glad Francisco Alvarez is back, and I'm so glad Luis Torrens is a part of the backstop with him. Carlos Ortiz in the chat saying, we need Iglesias back in the lineup. And I agree with this. Here's what happened, right? So oddly enough, I think 4 out of the 5 pitchers last week were all lefties in a row. So it was easy to just go to Jose Iglesias. Now, I know Jeff McNeil's not the guy you want to see out there, but, they're paying Jeff McNeil, and he's going to get most of the playing time against right-handed pitching. That's just it. Now, hopefully, this doesn't deter what we've seen from Jose Iglesias. Hopefully, he doesn't go on a slump from this, and then they send him back down to the minors. So I also agree, Carlos. I think we need to see Jose Iglesias in the lineup, even if they're doing some type of a split like they do with Francisco Alvarez and Luis Torrens, where it's 2-1. We got to figure this out because Jeff McNeil has just not been able to do anything. Like, he has been one of the worst players on this offensive line, maybe the worst outside of Omar Narvaez. So got to get Jose Iglesias in this lineup at some point. Maureen saying, our boys are playing good baseball. Finally, it's great to see. But like I said, I'm a cautious optimist. And like my guy Ibby says, every time I talk with him in the chat, it's one game at a time, right? Let's take this one game at a time. Let's hope that this Mets team can build on this momentum, because let's say they lose a game in some crazy fashion like they've lost in the past this year, and then that sets them on a downward spiral. Got to avoid that. Got to be able to avoid that. And they kind of did that on Sunday, right? The Mets almost blew a 7-1 lead. It became 7-2, 7-3, all the way up to 7-6. Offense came up in the bottom of the 8th and saying, we're not having this. And they ended up scoring 11 runs, beating the Padres 11-6. So thank goodness for that. And hopefully we see more of that moving forward. Shea Parking Lot saying, quote of the weekend, Luis Ariz is what McNeil used to be. Need McNeil to break out. Yeah. Right? 2022, McNeil was the batting champion. 2023 was Luis Ariz, and look at what Luis Ariz does. He wasn't a huge factor in this series, but we've seen Luis Ariz in the past because of the time we played the Marlins, and he was just unstoppable. And Jeff McNeil just can't get it going, and I don't like Jeff McNeil's swing. Right? Everyone keeps talking about it's like a golf swing, but also he's like leaving the plate to already run to first halfway through his swing. Something's got to change with Jeff McNeil. I think it's too late. I think he's already old enough. I don't know if there's anything to help him, and he is really on the hot seat, right? Pat Ragazzo talked about guys that are on the hot seat. Jeff McNeil is one of them, right? You got Luis Angel Acuna waiting in the wings. You have a guy that I think could play second base, and Ronnie Mauricio as well. He played better second base when he was teamed up with Francisco Lindor. That's a guy that can play second base. And you got Jose Iglesias. So, if Jeff continues to flounder here, the Mets they're not going to release him, but they will bench him, and he will become a part of the bench. I am fully on with that if they decide to do that. Rosie K saying, it's really nice to finally be able to talk about the Mets playing good baseball. I totally agree, man. Over the past couple of weeks, obviously it's been frustrating watching them lose, and you can talk to any of the content creators. I'm good friends with a lot of them. You don't want to be talking about the Mets losing. You don't want to be talking about trading at the trade deadline, although, that could get a lot of views. But when the Mets stink and they don't play well, a lot of people are not going to watch our content, because who wants to watch the Mets lose and then talk about the Mets lose all the time? So it's good to see them back on track, starting to win here, but they got to keep building the momentum. They got to keep building and try to figure out a way to make this sustainable while they wait for Kodai Senga to come back And while they wait for Francisco Alvarez to get going offensively, and while they wait for Edwin Diaz to find a level of consistency closing with hopefully his shoulder being okay and the starting pitching, hopefully now that Francisco Alvarez is back, maybe now Jose Quintana will pitch better, because I could tell you right now, if he pitched bad on Saturday, and I was there, it was a great performance from him. If he pitched bad, I wouldn't have been shocked if he would have been done. So it's great to have Francisco Alvarez back, and great to see this Mets team get into winning ways. The homestand, they went 5-1. Am I a little bit shocked that they swept the Padres? I'll say yes, because of that lineup. The pitching matchups were okay, but I thought that lineup would have been a problem, and they were almost a problem on Sunday. But it was nice to see the Mets get the sweep when needed. And this team that the Mets are coming to play now in Texas, the Texas Rangers, that's a team that they should sweep right now. I talked about all the pitching matchups during my series preview. If you haven't checked out that video, please do. It's on the YouTube page. I go through all the pitching matchups. I go through matchups, batter, pitcher matchups to watch out for, what players to watch out for. So please check that out. My guy Carlos Ramos saying, stop overthinking it. He looks like someone that's not sleeping well because he can't stop thinking. The contract got to him. He should have accepted our offer and got it out of the way, in my opinion. And that's in reference to Pete Alonso. Yeah, it sucks that he's overthinking this so much, because, he does not have to be relied upon as much when you got Lindor hitting as well as he has as of late. You got JD Martinez kind of carrying the team with the power and how he is this professional hitter. You got Brandon Nimmo, who has had a couple multi-hit games to kind of get back on track. Starling Marte, outside of his defense, has played well. You got Jose Iglesias in the lineup as much as they can get him. Francisco Alvarez is back. Mark Vientos has delivered. There should be no pressure on Pete Alonso. And you can really tell the difference, right? He wanted that Aaron Judge type contract. And it was just not, he's just not going to get it, right? It went from 300 mil. Now we're down to 200 mil. Look at what Aaron Judge did in his contract year. I mean, he set the record in the American League for home runs. So you can play through this. Pete is just in his own head. And I don't know if he'll recover. I want him to. I thought that home run on Sunday was a big step. I actually thought that double on Saturday was a big step as well. But, he needs to really get himself going. And I hope that this series coming up in Texas is something that he can build off of. We keep talking about building. This team is continuously trying to build off momentum. And it's not only a player thing, it's a team thing. So we'll see if they can do that. Duran Rivera is saying Mets need to upgrade left reliever options in Diekman and also over Ottavino. Look, what we saw from Diekman on Sunday was just awful. But it's a problem that has plagued not just Diekman, but this entire Mets bullpen, where they'll have a big lead and then they'll start nibbling around the plate. You got a 5-run lead. Just throw strikes. If he hits it and puts it in play, fine. But stop nibbling the plate. And when you got a soft tosser like Jake Diekman, I mean, it just doesn't work. It sucks that we had to send down Danny Young. Although if we didn't send down Danny Young, it probably would have been Daniel Nunez, who's been great and who's got great stuff. What a find that was. But at some point, you got to think that Danny Young will be back up with this bullpen, whether it's Diekman that can't get out of his own way or Ottavino keeps struggling. So we'll see what happens there. Shea parking lot. Yeah, man, we've talked about this. Mets need to call up Jose Butto already. Like you said, I talk about it every week. Why is Jose Butto still in the minors? Why is Christian Scott in the minors? I know CP from CPNY Sports wants Christian Scott back, and I hope he does come back at some point this season. It would be nice to see him return. Let me see some of the other comments that we have in here. Just bear with me because now I have to go back after I start some of these comments. Oh, let's see. Here we go. Rosie K also, banking off what I just said, why isn't Christian Scott up here? I don't know, man. You thought that maybe if Jose Quintana had a bad outing, that maybe Christian Scott would have finally been up here, but I would like to see them go to a 6-man rotation. I really would. I think it would help all the starters get some rest and keep them fresh. I think it would also help the bullpen as well. You got Adrian Hauser now in there eating up multiple innings. You got Daniel Nunez eating up multiple innings. And then you throw Ottavino in the 5th inning. You could throw Jake Diekman in the 5th or 6th inning. And you got, Drew Smith, who got a big strikeout of Fernando Tatis. But he's also human. So, I just don't know where they go with these guys here. And in trying to, turn things around with that cropping and getting the kids up here. Because I really do think that next season, Christian Scott and Jose Buto should be a part of this rotation, because they're not just going to sign a whole bunch of free agents again. Maybe one, maybe two. Maybe they try to get an ace of the staff. But the whole rotation is not going to be filled with free agents again. I think that, and, apologize to Carson for this because I know he's a huge Tyler McGill fan. I think Tyler McGill is destined for the bullpen. He can't keep his pitch counts down. He can't put away hitters. I know some of that's due to bad defense, and Carson will probably bring that up on his show later today and always brings it up in our chat. But yeah, he has him and David Peterson is kind of like their last stand to make themselves a part of this rotation for not only the rest of this year, but next year as well. So I think once David Peterson came up, I think they just said they're going to give him the shot and let Christian Scott build down, because we all know Christian Scott is not going to finish this season with this team, right? Christian Scott, it probably has an innings limit. He probably wouldn't pitch in the playoffs at that point, and I wouldn't want to mess with his growth. I know that David Stearns knows what he's doing when it comes to the minor leagues and is evaluating these guys, and maybe he just wanted to give Christian Scott a taste. So we'll see what happens moving forward with that. Brad saying 2024 transition into winning baseball. That's what Stearns, that's what Cohen had talked about, Mendoza a little bit as well. It is that kind of transition year for these Mets. And, right now they sit at 33 and I think 37, 5 games under 500, but they're only a couple games out of a wild card spot. This is a time where the Mets should be taking advantage of the National League and the fact that it's so bad, right? I think I said earlier, and I don't know if anyone has the update here, but at the last time I saw, there were either 4 or 5 teams that were over 500 in the National League. So the Mets have a great opportunity to get themselves in a playoff spot. And you look on paper, this Mets team is better than a lot of those teams ahead of them. They just got to live up to the back of their baseball card. Lindor has to continue to be that leadoff hitter and do what he's doing there. Brandon Nimmo seems to be batting better in that second spot than the third, because for some reason that third spot in the lineup seems to have been cursed. I think we all can agree, right? You had Pete there for a while, Lindor there for a while, Nimmo there for a while. None of it was working. And, now that you got Lindor and, Nimmo back to back, which was a big thing that happened on Saturday, was that hustle double from Lindor to lead off an inning into the double from Nimmo to start the scoring. And the Mets were off to the races. JD Martinez was, hitting bombs all over the place. So great to see that and from that team as well. Jeff Cohen in the chat saying, team playing well. Let's not look ahead. Win today, worry about tomorrow. I always say this. Even last year and in 2022, when the game right in front of you is in the palm of your hands, you have to grasp it. You have to win that game first and worry about the rest when that day comes. but win the game at hand first. Worry about tomorrow's game tomorrow. So I agree with Jeff Cohen on that. Duran Rivera says to bring up Jose Buto, Christian Scott, and put Minaya and McGill in the bullpen. I think that's something that we could see towards the end of the season. I don't know how they're going to handle this. It all depends on where the Mets are at, right? It all depends on where the Mets are at, whether they hold on to Luis Severino, trade him at the deadline, whether they buy, whether they sell. So I wouldn't see this as I do see this as an option at some point, right? Minaya doesn't really go deep into games. Same with Tyler McGill. So I could see those two guys being in the bullpen. And like I said, the Mets need a lefty, right? We talked about it. The Mets need a lefty out of the bullpen. Maureen asking if the Mets continue to play like this, do they become buyers at the deadline? I would have to think they are. And I trust that David Stearns is not going to pull this Billy Epler BS where they try to get cute and, they bring in this, like the Vogelback rough tandem instead of actually going for a DH. I think that what happens at this trade deadline, if they're buying, it's not only to try to get them into the postseason this year, but it's to get them to a place where they have a player for the future as well. If they are trading prospects, it's not for a rental. It's for someone that's going to affect this team moving forward. It's for a trade that's going to bring a guy that's going to have a couple years. That's the only thing that I can think of when it comes to this trade deadline. G Money Stacks saying, don't forget to subscribe to Subway to Shea podcast, plus the Mets Evening Brew podcast, as well as hit the like button, share, comment, and spread the word to everyone, including your friends. I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, like this video, subscribe, share it. Tonight, you can catch me on the Mets Evening Brew. We're going to be taking, video calls on the show, the open panel. You can join in. You can be a part of the whole episode. A lot of guys that are in this chat, Shea Parking Lot, G Money Stacks, have all been a part of it. You can be a part of that too. And I will be very appreciative for your support. Matt Ibiabin is saying Omar Santos forever. Yeah, Omar Santos was a good catcher when the Mets had him. So he is not a part of my, terrible catchers. When I think of Mets catchers, I think of Mike D. Felice, Brian Schneider. Who else? Plawecki, another one that I thought that wasn't good. Kevin Plawecki. I almost said Jason Plawecki, but Kevin Plawecki. And the list goes on and on with some of the catches that we have had here that have really not taken off, right? Like it took so long for us to get to Francisco Alvarez. Really, the last really good catches the Mets had were Mike Piazza and then Paul LaDuca for a year or two. So it's been a long time for these Mets. Jeff Cohen with the news flash. JD Martinez just named NL Player of the Week. Well-deserved honor for him. Let me go through the stats over the last 15 days for JD Martinez. If you missed the beginning of the show, last 15 days batting .333, 5 home runs, and 16 RBIs. He even has 10 walks in that time. And on the season, .293, 8 homers, 27 RBIs, and an .881 OPS. Like I said, as advertised, it took him a while to get some clutch hits, but he's finally delivering on that end. That big home run, that big game winner on Thursday against the Marlins. He had the big game on Saturday, Friday. So, I mean, he has just been outstanding for this lineup. And if you could get Pete Alonso going and have those two guys back to back, I mean, we're talking about some Bash Brothers type business right there. So, hopefully Pete Alonso can get them going. Going through a couple of these more comments before we wrap up the show. Let's see. Appreciative of Shea and Sons podcast. I'm here for the handsome man on the screen. I got myself a haircut, and Keith always notices that. Keith and Key always notice the haircut there. But make sure you guys check them out. They're going to be on the Mets Weekly once this show wraps up at 5 o'clock. Go straight to Mets Weekly. Get all your Mets content. They're going to dive deeper into the stats. That's my guy Carson diving deep into the stats. Good conversations, good talking points. Andrew Acevedo also a part of that, talking about Luke Ritter. It may be time to see Luke Ritter, honestly. I mean, how much more time should we give DJ Stewart? Right? I mean, DJ Stewart really hasn't done much. I was never a big fan of re-signing him because of the 2-week span he had in the end of August, early September. I just knew that this wasn't going to be, and thankfully they didn't give him a big deal. It was a 1-year deal. Fine. He's got an option. They could send him down. But I think that Luke Ritter, who I think he had 2 home runs yesterday, and he's been really tearing the cover off the ball. I think it's time to give him an opportunity and give him a chance, whether it's to come off the bench or, he just needs to get some at-bats in the major leagues. I think it's time for him to get that opportunity. Also, you got to look at Ryan Clifford, too, in Double-A. He's been tearing the cover off the ball. Also, Luis Angel Acuna. So, you look at a guy like Jeff McNeil, and if he continues to play this way, his days are numbered. Luis Angel Acuna, I think, is batting over 300 this month and has really, lighted up on offense. So we'll see if he can, get himself into Queens and maybe overtake what we've seen from Jeff McNeil. But right now, I think the Mets are going to go with Jose Iglesias as that bag. And look at what Jose Iglesias has done, not only on the field, at bat, but just his personality. He brings sometimes like leadership to this team. I know he's not starting every day, but the dude's a leader in the clubhouse. He's a veteran. That's why I wanted him on this roster from day one. The Mets needed him on this roster in day one and not Zach Short or Joey Wendell. You look at the stats every year for Jose Iglesias, especially when he didn't get picked up. He hit in the minor leagues the last couple of years. So he never stopped hitting. I hope he gets more opportunity. I hope he gets more playing time. Shout out to Brad with the fresh cut. Shea parking lot also with the little haircut there. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Carlos Ramos is styling and profiling like the nature boy, Ric Flair. Lane Kerner, we just talked about Ritter and Jose Budo. Yes, I think that they both should be up here. So we'll see if they come up soon. We have the Grimace era has begun. The Mets are 5-0. But I'll give a shout out to Maureen. If the Mets sweep in Texas, can we start the Maureen era? I think we can. And we will if it happens, right? You're going tomorrow and Wednesday. So if the Mets sweep, I think the Maureen era has begun. I mean, Maureen, you have been a part of a lot of big Mets moments, so your era is already here. But let's see what else we got here from the comments before we wrap up. Shea parking lot, Rally Pimp, Grimace, Maureen, book it. Ibby, Mets Talk with Hayden in the house. Appreciate you. Let's go Mets. Hopefully you guys check out the round table. I know they had one last night with Mets Talk with Hayden, with my guy Hector in Washington Heights, Blunt Thoughts, CP in there, and Talking Mets with Rob. Check them out as well. They got shows all throughout the week. All of these content creators have more of a schedule than I do. I am so sporadic when it comes to when I can do my shows because of work, but I will try to get as many out as I can. And I appreciate you guys for tuning into the show. CP in the house as well from the round table. Did someone say Christian Scott? I better not get started. We covered all those bases with Christian Scott, and we made sure that we gave you a shout out, CP, on that as well. Brad saying Adam Ottavino and Drew Smith shouldn't see the 8th or 9th innings anymore. Totally agree. And look at when we saw Adam Ottavino. I think he came out in, what was it, the 5th or 6th inning? He has lost his, spot in this bullpen. I think even Adrian Hauser has pitched better, and he's going to get more opportunities. That's another guy in Adam Ottavino who is working his way out of this bullpen if he continues to pitch like this. Like, we all know that he can't pitch in big spots. But, is he going to work his way out of the bullpen? We'll see. We'll see what happens. As we continue to go through the chat here before we wrap up the show. Rosie K bringing this up, and I agree. McGill shouldn't be in the rotation. He may be better as a long reliever. I think so. I think once Adrian Hauser is gone, right? Because right now he's that long reliever. I don't know if they'll be able to trade him or what. I think Tyler McGill will fit into a long reliever role. But to be fair, too, he's also had some bad defense behind him. Although I still don't think that he's a starter for the long haul. I just don't. Shea Parking Lot saying Francisco Lindor has a good shot to beat Cal Ripken as most home runs by a shortstop. He does. And you saw what he did on Sunday, that leadoff home run, that leadoff bomb from the left-handed side. It seems like he's getting comfortable on both sides of the plate, especially now that he's the leadoff hitter. I just hope this lasts, because all we've heard is it's too cold and these guys can't hit. Like, if this team makes it to October, you better be ready to hit in the cold. That's for sure. Let's see what else before we wrap up this show. Shout out to a lot of you guys in here in the chat, especially if I can't get to your comments. I know I saw Eddie Presti in here. Will be on the show later tonight for Mets Evening Brew. Yuki Matsui's in here. Jeff Cohen. So if I missed you, Douglas Barnes is in here. Douglas Barnes, I haven't checked out the lineup, but he's saying DJ Stewart is batting fifth tonight. You gotta feel that DJ Stewart is on his last legs as well. Now, if he doesn't hit today, why do you keep a guy like Luke Ritter down in the minors? Like, what could go wrong bringing up a guy like Luke Ritter? He still has an option, DJ Stewart. So let's see what happens here. Before I wrap up here, let me see what this lineup is on Twitter. So I'm going to bring it up on my phone and we'll discuss the lineup that the Mets have here. Of course, I'm not on my Mets Twitter. And of course, the first thing that pops up on Twitter for me is Ibby making a clown face out of Salicata and Brandon Tierney. So that was in waiting for that. All right, here's the Mets starting lineup for the first game against Texas. Francisco Lindor leading off at shortstop. Brandon Nimmo in left field batting second. JD Martinez batting third. Pete Alonso batting fourth. DJ Stewart batting fifth, as was talked about from Douglas Barnes. Batting sixth, Tyrone Taylor. Mark Vientos batting seventh. Francisco Alvarez eighth. And Jeff McNeil batting ninth. So Jose Iglesias still out of the lineup. Obviously, the Mets... The Mets are not facing lefties right now, so Jose Iglesias is not going to play. I have a feeling that's how this split is going to go. So we'll see how you got to pay close attention, right? Going to pay close attention to DJ Stewart today. Going to pay close attention to Jeff McNeil. See if they continue to struggle, and we'll have to see what happens there. Daniel Caps saying we should have put our best lineup in winning game one is very important. And then he goes on to say Lindor's 0-6 versus John Gray. I don't think Lindor's never going to sit. So I think he's the least of the worries. I think the more problem is, having a Jeff McNeil in the lineup, having a DJ Stewart in the lineup. And if they don't get started, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've stopped getting frustrated with this team and their lineups. It is what it is. It is what it is, and we'll see what happens. Also followed by Daniel Caps, Alvarez home run tonight. I hope so. He needs to get going offensively, and I would definitely like to see that happen. No, Daniel Caps, I know you didn't say to sit Lindor. That was just off of my own top head. I'm not saying you said to sit him, but that was just off of the top of my head. Duran Rivera saying, yeah, it's possible. Stewart and McNeil are possibly going to be automatic outs for this game here. So, look, Mets have a big series coming up. The Mets have to build off of this momentum that they have already started with the homestand. Now they're going on the road where they play a lot better. Let's see the Mets get down to business because they struggled against Texas. And then I think they go to Chicago. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to look at the schedule, but I think they go to Chicago next. Take care of business against these two teams. Have a winning record. Win series. Get us back over 500. And then we can worry about the standings in the wild card. And then we can worry about making the playoffs. Right now, one game at a time. One series at a time, 1 week at a time, and let's get back over 500. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for Subway to Shea. I'm over the hour. I apologize to Mets Weekly for going a little bit over, but you can head over to them now and watch their show. Appreciate you and just doing this with me today. Thanks to Pat Ragazzo of Sports Illustrated for joining the show and being a part of it. 89 people in here. Appreciate you all. Like I said before, subscribe to Subway to Shea, not only on YouTube, but also Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And make sure you're following all my social media. I got a lot of content coming your way, a lot of videos coming your way. So make sure you check out my shorts and all my posts. X, Instagram, TikTok at Subway to Shea. And you can follow me on X at AntRivera86. But you all know I spend most of my time here on Subway to Shea. That wraps it up here. Go to Mets Weekly. Frank, Carson, Andrew, the guys at Shea and Sons are the guests. Check out their Mets content leading up to the game. And make sure to check me out tonight, again, doing double duty. Mets Evening Brew on the Morning Brew Sports Network. It's going to be me, Eddie Presti, and Al Cintrone of WFAN. For Anthony Rivera, though, this has been Subway to Shea. You guys have a good night. Enjoy this Mets series coming up. And always remember, let's go Mets.